Splat! Zoo!
Hello and welcome back to the Zombie Kitty podcast. I suppose you guys wouldn't have noticed the difference, but for me it's been 2 weeks since recording, because I actually recorded the last two episodes right before basically starting work on my final major project and all that lot. So it feels a bit weird coming back into it, but anyway, it is the last Friday of the month, which means for people who have just joined, I've had a few new followers on SoundCloud and on Twitter. Hi. But for people who don't know, let's just turn that down a bit, is that I do a behind the scenes episode based around a film. I'll get to that. But I will be looking at pre-production, production, post-production, release, critical response, influences and inspirations, and then my overall opinion. Now, I'm actually, from this episode onwards, I'm going to be starting to branch out to TV shows and video games. So the behind the scenes episode only will either focus on a film or a video game or a TV show. The regular episodes will only stick to film. So I thought it'd be a good, nice little segue to introduce what this episode's going to be on, which is Croc, Legend of the Gobbos. This was a PlayStation 1 game that was released in 97? Might not got that right. I didn't write it down. Oh crap. I'm going to say 97, but that's 96, 97. And this was a platforming game. Croc was a little crocodile that was found by these little, I want to call them fluff balls with eyes, called Gobbos. And he grew up with them, but then this random villain called Baron Dante ends up kidnapping them. So Croc has to go around, I think it's 4 islands, and rescue all the Gobbos and defeat Baron Dante at the end. So that's basically what it is. And you had the first island was like the home island, and then you had the second island was like a winter themed one. The third island was a desert island, and the fourth one was a castle. And then once you got all the Gobbos and defeated Baron Dante, you then had to collect like puzzle pieces, which would unlock the last world, the last island. So that's just a little, I suppose, brief-ish synopsis and layout of what the game was. But let's go into pre-production. So a lot of this has already been said on quite a few other sort of YouTube videos and stuff, but Croc actually was originally supposed to be a Mario spin-off game where you played completely as Yoshi. The game was developed by Argonaut Entertainment, and they basically came up with the idea. They'd worked with Nintendo before on Star Fox. Just Star Fox. I think it was the first game. I will also say that there were some things that I was not able to find out, which is a shame, but it can't really be helped sometimes. But the game, the original Mario spin-off, was supposed to be released on the Nintendo 64. However, Nintendo actually rejected the idea. They didn't think it was a good idea, so they scrapped it, which actually also ended their business partnership with Argonaut Entertainment. This then meant that Argonaut had to actually find another publisher for the game because they still wanted to develop this. and they ended up going with, I've got the list actually later on, I've just realised, so I am going to go into that later on. But one of the publishers, who was Mitsui, which was their Japanese publisher, decided that, or basically said, it would be a good idea for you to release this game, which by this point had developed into Croc, release this game onto PlayStation 1, PC and the Sega Saturn. And the Saturn was supposed to be the main platform for the game, but then it was changed to PlayStation because of its popularity. That became very quickly successful, I suppose, obviously, as we know now. This is kind of going on to the sequel, because there was a sequel for this game, and that was supposed to be on the Dreamcast, but that was cancelled when Fox Interactive decided to just drop support for the machine altogether. I never actually owned a Dreamcast, but I know quite a few people who did, and I remember it being sold quite a lot in Toys R Us and stuff like that. But at the time I had a PlayStation, and I kind of kept with that. So I don't know. I don't know if Dreamcast lasted very long. Actually, did they? I don't remember. It would have been interesting as well to see what the Yoshi game would have actually looked like. But I suppose I've never played Yoshi's Island, but isn't that the same thing? Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that. But it would have been interesting to see what Argonauts did with that original idea instead of developing it off into Croc. The villain's name, which is now called Baron Dante, was originally actually going to be called Denver, until the lead designer, who was actually also a film fan, decided to change the name of it when he joined the development team. And a quote is apparently that he told the team, "What, Denver? That just sounds rubbish." And then he changed it to Dante. This is what I actually found interesting. So the name Dante was actually picked for the villain's name, and it was a homage to Joe Dante, the director for Gremlins, and from what I remember, Piranha. I'm going to get that wrong. Actually, probably not. I can't remember, but Gremlins and Gremlins 2 is the one that I know of. But I thought that was really interesting, because I would have never have realised that. Again, this is for the sequel. There's a couple of things here for the sequel, but that I wanted to include because I just thought they were so interesting, especially given the amount of work that was done for both of the games. Especially this little bit, which is that the design document for Croc 2 was around twice the size of the Yellow Pages book. Yellow Pages, if you don't know what that is, it was a giant phone directory book, and it was this huge thing. I think you also had a Thompson one as well. That was back in the 90s, I think, to early 2000s. They're not really around anymore from what I know of, but we always used to get the Thompson one delivered to us as junk mail. I don't know how they fit it through the letterbox, but there we go. But I always remember that. We had Thompson instead of Yellow Pages. But yeah, it was like a giant phone directory book. But the fact that their design document for the layouts and the character designs and all that stuff was the size of that is just amazing. It really shows you the amount of work that goes into these games as well. And even the design document for the first game was actually similar in size. So again, it's really interesting to see how much work goes into games. It'll be cool if they release these as an art book as well, because I really like art books. My recent one that I bought is the Bioshock 2. And the Ghost in the Shell for the recent film art books. So I think that would be kind of cool if they ever release that, but I don't know if they ever will, which is a shame. because I'd really like to see that. However, around 10 pages from each of these documents were only used in the creation of each game. So, it just shows you how much was scrapped. So, but that's what I'm saying, like, it'd be cool if they released that to show you what their original ideas were and what they had, because I assume that would be a huge art book for each game. It would be kind of cool, even to show just early sketches and stuff. It would be cool to see what it looked like. This then brings us on to production. This one's going to be a little bit different because it is a video game instead of a film. But I've tried my best here. There might be a couple of things that sort of cross over from the pre-production to this. So there's a couple of things here where I was a bit confused on what sections they belong to, but let's continue on. What I thought was really interesting is that there's hardly any dialogue in this. It's all sort of noises and stuff. I don't think there's any human dialogue at all, actually. I think it's just like noises and just sort of mumbles and stuff. But all of the voices were actually done by one person, which I actually think is quite impressive because of the vocal range that this guy could do. I wasn't able to find out the name of the guy, which is a shame. But yeah, all of the voices for the characters were done in both of the Croc games by one person. So again, if you've ever played the games, it's more the vocal range that's impressive. Because like the Gobbos have really squeaky voices. They sound a bit like, I suppose they sound a bit like Gizmo. That's what it reminds me of anyway. Both Croc 1 and 2 almost included parachuting levels, which is something that fans had requested quite often, but due to the time restraints affecting it, many of the ideas that were going to be included in the game were actually never included. There was another one where there was supposed to be snowboarding levels, and in the first game you can actually, I can't remember when it is, but it might be when you come off an edge of something like a cliff or a pillar. Croc does this weird sort of animation where he sort of sidesteps or like tries to grab onto something or lean against something. And apparently those were actually supposed to be the early animation gestures for when he was snowboarding, but they left those in, which I thought was really interesting. This is something that I never knew of because I never had this on the Sega Saturn. I had this on the PlayStation, but it's something that if you ever played it on the Saturn, it was something that people spoke about a lot with this game. The Sega Saturn version of the first game, Legend of the Gobbos, actually had a weird bug. So basically what happened is, I'm quoting here, but it said if you put the CD in and then start up the console, Croc and all of his enemies would appear to be headless. In actual fact, it looked this way because non-textured polygons weren't displayed. The origin of this bug comes from a difference between Saturn development kits and the consumer version of the console, which ultimately meant that it wasn't noticed until it was too late. In North America, the buggy version of the game was recalled and is now quite tricky to find. However, in Europe, and particularly the UK, is more common, as it wasn't recalled there. The workaround is to start up the Saturn first, then pop the game into the CD drive and run it. Which, I remember doing that with a PlayStation with a couple of them actually. And I think it's even with this game as well, because my copy of the game, again, all of my PlayStation games I've had since I was like 5 to 6, and I've still got the original copies. But my edition of Croc, there's one level where it goes to a cutscene after you defeat one of the boss levels, and it just freezes and that's it. Like, you can't do anything, so you have to restart the game, which is annoying. So it did mean that I had to actually, I think at the time it was like, it's the same thing, take the disc out, switch the console on, and then while it was running, put the disc back in, and it was fine. But now it doesn't actually, that level doesn't work at all. which means I then had to find a password to get to the very end and go back and just replay everything that way if I wanted to. So then I could skip that particular level, which is really annoying, but I suppose at the same time, it's also sort of, due to me playing it so much as well. I think my Crash Bandicoot Warped edition has a similar sort of freezing moment, but it's not as bad. Like a couple of times in the level where he jumps up here, it will freeze for like 2 seconds and then continue fine. But it's always that horrible moment of like, oh, please work, please work. This is something I really liked when I was doing research for this. This is something I thought was really interesting. Again, I've kind of just written it down into a block text thing. But it says that due to the technical limitations, the individual rooms in Croc, Legend of the Gobbos, really aren't that big in size, even though they appear to be. To achieve this effect, the team behind the game came up with a clever idea. Since they couldn't make the levels any bigger than they already had, they just made Croc himself smaller, thus making the areas seem more cavernous. So I couldn't read that word then. This is easily observed if you actually compare the PlayStation and the PC versions of the game to the Saturn one. Croc wasn't shrunk down, I can't speak today, in the Saturn port, so everything seems a lot more enclosed. It seems like the Saturn version has a lot of problems, and it does seem like the development team they weren't really aware of the differences. The Saturn copy is actually something I'd be really interested in playing, but I've never owned a Sega Saturn, and it's not really a console I plan to. Only because I don't really know any sort of exclusive games that were on there that could just be played on the PS1. So it'll be interesting to look up videos or something as well, though, maybe. I've only got one note for post-production, so we are going on to post-production now, but there's only one note for it, so the gibberish voices for the Gobbos and other characters in Croc 2 were created from recording words in English and then chopping them up and mixing them around in order to achieve a babbling effect. Amusingly, this audio had to be checked over to make sure that none of it resembled swearing. Like, can you imagine that job? Of like, okay, you've got to check over this complete gibberish just to make sure there's no rude words in there. Also, yeah, I did notice that was for the second game. Though, again, like I said, there's a couple of things that I've included from the sequel because I thought they'd be quite interesting, as well as the first game, but primarily I just wanted things from the first game. So that was the only note I had for post-production. I tried to find out how long the game took to actually make, but unfortunately I wasn't able to find this out. Release, this one's a little bit long. So the other publishers, as well as Mitsui for Japan, was Interactive Fox and THQ. And they were for the Game Boy Color versions. Both Croc 1 and Croc 2 were actually released on the Game Boy Color as well. So the first game was distributed by 20th Century Fox in America, Electronic Arts in Europe and the UK, and then it was actually re-released in 2001 for like the classic PlayStation Game Edition by Ubisoft. And then I've got a whole load of release dates here, which is going to be a whole load of fun. So let's get into this. PlayStation 1, Croc Legend of the Gobbos was released in North America on the 29th of September 1997. Okay, so it was 97, not 96. I knew I wrote it down somewhere, but at the time I was like, okay, maybe I didn't write it down. But there we go, 97. The Sega Saturn versions, I wasn't able to find out the actual release date for North America and Europe, but they were both released again in 1997. The Japanese version was released on the 26th of March 1998. I've realised I haven't done the PlayStation release dates. 29th of September 1997 was when the PlayStation release for Croc happened in North America. Europe was, for the PlayStation, was October 1997. And then Japan was 18th of December 1997. That was a bit of a mishmash, but oh well. Microsoft Windows. So there, again, the PC version. I wasn't able to find out many of the dates for some of these, so I was only able to find out the North American one for this version, which was 26th of November 1997. And then the Game Boy Color version came out a couple years later. What was the delay? What was the problem? This is what I find so weird. So I'll say the release dates, and then I'll say my opinion. North America was 6th of June 2000, and Europe was the 1st of December 2000. Why did it take 3 years? I wasn't able to find this out again, which is unfortunate, because I would have really been interested to know. Like, maybe it was sort of a delay thing, like maybe they didn't realise how popular the Game Boy Color was going to be. I don't know, but then you also had the normal Game Boy beforehand. Maybe they just wanted to see what the sales were going to be like. Or even if releasing it on Game Boy was going to be a good idea. And the PlayStation 1 version sold over 1 million copies in the US and was actually a bestseller in the UK for 2 months. So it didn't do that badly, really. Which then brings us on to critical response. It had slightly mixed reviews from the PC and the Game Boy Color versions, but it had really positive reviews on the Sega Saturn and PS1 version. Review site Game Rankings gave the PS1 79%, the Sega Saturn version 76%, the PC version 60%, and the Game Boy Color 54%. And the praise went to the gameplay, soundtrack, and visuals. Criticisms were in the repetitiveness and weird camera angles. Again, I'm going to go back to that bit actually when I go to my overall opinion of the game. And in 2014, Games Radar named the game as one of the best Saturn games ever. And then Croc actually became Argonaut's best-selling game. So it didn't do too badly, to be honest. It just depended on, I guess it depends on what version you got. Which then brings us on to influences and inspirations. So the Yoshi game concept, which was the original idea for Croc, actually later served as an inspiration on the development of Super Mario 64, according to Argonaut. I haven't been able to find any other sources to back this up, but it would be interesting to see if that was actually the case. I've never played Super Mario 64, so I don't really know if there might seem any resemblance at all to the original concept of a Yoshi standalone game. And then the Croc engine has powered quite a few other games by now, including Aladdin in Nasira's Revenge, which was one of the Disney games, The Emperor's New Groove Disney game, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So it's kind of interesting that a lot of other games have used the same sort of engine. Again, unfortunately, I wasn't able to find out what gaming engine was used. And then obviously it had a sequel, Croc 2, which was released on PlayStation and Game Boy Color in 1999. Which is also really weird because then with the Game Boy Color versions, it was released, the sequel was released on Game Boy Color before the first game, which is such a weird order to do it in. But I've already commented on that, I guess. And then this is something I didn't know. There were 3 mobile games that were actually released. So you had Croc Mobile Jungle Rumble, Volcanic Panic, and Croc Mobile Pinball. I have not been able to find any other information on that. I had to actually go onto Wikipedia to find that out. So it wasn't something I was aware of, but wasn't that around the time that people were having like the Nokia 3310s? The indestructible phone, as it's called. I remember having one when I was 10. And And then in 2 separate Argonaut interviews in 2001, it was stated that work on a third Croc title was supposed to begin soon. One of those interviews also hinted that there was supposed to be a Croc racing game. However, it's 2017 and we still haven't got a third one, which is kind of a shame because I would like to see a third one more in the style of what the first game was. Because the second game, I think it was a lot more open world and it was a lot more sort of RPG type, I think, or similar to that kind of style. I haven't really played the sequel, I'll be honest. I've been trying to get a copy of it with not too much luck, to be honest. But it looks visibly different, very different from what the first game is. Which then brings on to my overall opinion. I'm going to go back up to the critical response bit, because my overall opinion is that I've played this quite a lot, and I think the first game is okay. I feel like it has a lot of problems. Control-wise, it's responsive, but Croc moves in a very slippy, slidey way. But the settings of the levels allow you, suits that, so it's okay. Again, making Croc smaller so the areas appear bigger is actually better. I don't know what it's like on the Sega Saturn, but it must be a bit frustrating because you do have a couple of levels, especially in the desert island, where there's like really tiny platforms that you have to get to, and that's where the controls completely mess you up, and it doesn't really work. So I'd hate to see what it was like on the Sega Saturn if they didn't change that sort of size thing. But I don't know, I feel like sometimes it's a bit too easy. Like, you can probably do the whole game in like an hour, 45 minutes an hour. And then there's not really any end reward for it. Like, you get to the end and it feels like there's not really much point in what you've done. So there's no explanation. There's just this little tiny sort of like, thank you for completing this game thing. I'm not really spoiling much, to be honest. There's nothing really to spoil. But it's not like, I don't know, something with Crash Bandicoot, where you've got sort of ending sequences and explanations to what's going on. But with Croc, it's just like, okay, cool, thank you, bye. It's like, oh, okay. I would like to know more, but oh well. I will say, though, going back to the critical responses, I'm going to get all the negative stuff out of the way first, but criticisms was with the repetitiveness and the weird camera angles. I've kind of, again, it is a little bit repetitive. I don't think it's too bad, but again, the levels are a little bit easy. The camera is god-awful. The idea that you can change where the camera goes is actually pretty cool. And again, for like 1997, it was a different kind of thing. But oh my god, the camera will drive you nuts. It's not good, and it could have been improved. Okay, yeah, let's just go on to the praise stuff. I've got the negative stuff out of the way. The praise went to the gameplay, soundtrack, and visuals. I feel like I've kind of gone already over the controls. Soundtrack. The soundtrack is one of the best gaming soundtracks I've ever heard. It's like a jazz type soundtrack. It's really, really cool. And it's one of my favourite ones. Actually, probably is my favourite one ever, to be honest. And that's next to like Crash Bandicoot and Bioshock. So I've got the whole playlist on a YouTube playlist saved as well, and that's always kind of cool to listen to. And the visuals are gorgeous as well. Like, it's a very colourful game, and like it's a very bright game as well. Like, everything feels, this is going to sound weird, but everything feels alive. Like, nothing feels just flat and dead on the screen. Like, all the locations are really cool, and all the settings are really cool to look at and really nice to look at, and the fact that each section has its own separate music is really cool, and it just looks really nice. It's just a shame about the weird camera and sometimes really slippy controls. Like, I've played this quite a lot now, so the slippy controls don't bother me that too much now. But as you know, when I was first playing this game, oh my god, it drove me nuts. it was a bit annoying and a bit of a nuisance. So it does have its flaws, but I keep coming back to this one because I think it's just fun to play, and it's just sort of a good time waster. But that's all I have to say on Croc Legend of the Gobbos, really. So once I've done the main segment, I'm going to start doing podcast shout-outs and any sort of YouTube shout-outs or something. So I've got the Cinema. I've listened to their recent episode. I probably shouldn't have done because I haven't actually seen Fast and Furious 8 yet, which is what their latest episode is on. Basement Condition, who have just released their 100th episode. Yay! Also, happy birthday, Brandon. I forgot to mention that on Twitter. Oops. SnakeMan0429, he's actually a YouTuber, but he does a lot of live streaming stuff. I think he's got a live stream tonight, actually. But he's really cool. I discovered him from his Crash Bandicoot live streams, actually. I think about a month ago, actually. A month or two ago. And it was pretty cool watching him live stream. Or I suppose it wasn't a live stream at the time, but he did live stream it, I think. And it was pretty cool to watch him zip through the first game like it was nothing. I was like, I'm impressed. That was pretty good. I suppose via VHS, again, I've just listened to their not recent podcast episode. What episode was it? I can't remember. Help me. For the explosions and the slow-mo episode. I'll try and see if I can get what number it was. Season 2, episode 4. I'm a bit behind on podcasts at the moment. But they're the ones I can think of at the moment. I have done some more shout-outs for today on Twitter. So if I haven't done that many today, I suppose that's it. That's it for today. I'm sorry this one's a little late as well. But I'll try my best. So that was the behind the scenes on Croc Legend of the Gobbos. If you have any films, video games or TV shows that you would like me to look at in terms of the behind the scenes content, please let me know. I have a Twitter, which is at ZKittyPodcast. You can also email me now, which is zombiekitty182@gmail.com. So you can message me if you have any requests or you just want to comment on something or, whatever, really. And I also have a website, which is zombiekittypodcast.wordpress.com. So again, if you want to message me on there or comment on there, then you can do. I also have a SoundCloud account. I completely messed that up. And I'm also on iTunes. I need to kind of promote my iTunes thing more. I hear that rating and reviewing helps you. So if any of you listen to me on iTunes, then please rate and review and all that good stuff. I don't really know how it works, but there we go. Or if you listen to me on SoundCloud, then thank you and all that stuff. I'm rambling now, so I'm going to go and I'll see you all soon. Bye!